Welcome everyone to this session 4 titled Too Much Information. Presenting, we have Jérôme Dugast from Université Paris Dauphine. So please, Jérôme, the screen is yours for 20 minutes.
All right, so thanks, Michel, and thanks to the organizer for putting our paper on the program. This paper with Thierry, what we're trying to do here is to understand the effect of data abundance on the equilibrium of financial markets, and our objective is to be very specific on how data can enter as an input in the design of trading strategies to understand its effect. So one motivation for our paper is the growing interest of fund managers for so-called alternative data. So you can think of satellite images or credit or debit card data that can be used in the end for trading purposes. So in order to exploit this growing amount of data, some funds are somehow systematizing the way they process data in order to extract predictors out of this data to be used for trading purposes again. So this picture, for instance, that we have borrowed from the Wall Street Journal, illustrates how a hedge fund, WorldQuant, operates. So as you see, it works as an assembly line where you have at the beginning of the line some researchers that are analyzing data to extract alphas, predictors. So that is a variable that can predict returns and that can in turn be used for trading purposes, used by the trading desk of the fund. So this evolution, this kind of industrialization of the search for predictors, it's a natural evolution given the progress in information technology. But we should really notice that this progress has two distinct dimensions. So first, it allows investors to have, as we just discussed, more data. So the data abundance is this an increase, if you want, in the space where you search for predictors. But it also comes with more computing power, which means that to process, it's faster to process a given amount of data. So these two dimensions raise this question, and in particular, data abundance can create a search problem for funds. So first, which data sets to consider when looking for predictors, and more generally, how to optimally mine such a vast amount of data. So the questions we are after in this paper is whether the effects of these different dimensions, greater computing power and data abundance, on prices and allocation in financial markets are similar or different, or should we just think of more data as lowering the cost of acquiring information in standard models, or is it different? And if it's different, maybe we should understand how speculators optimally search for predictors to have a theory of the equilibrium data mining. This is what we want to do. And then we want to explore the implications of the progress in technologies and the two dimensions on information, on the diversity of predictors, on trading profit, asset price informativeness, etc. So our contribution is really here is to provide a new model of information acquisition in financial markets to address these questions. And more particularly, what we're going to do is to formalize this optimal search for predictors by investors. And doing so, we will be able to analyze separately the effects of data abundance from those of computing power. And the main message of the paper is that, well, these two dimensions, basically, they don't have the same effects on the market equilibrium. So in terms of contribution to the literature, so we provide a new model of information acquisition, and basically we use it to speak about the effects of big data on financial markets. So I'm going to skip this to be on time. So the model. So we consider a model for financial markets. So there is an asset with a payoff omega that is normally distributed within zero. There is a continuum of risk-averse speculators. So each speculator basically maximizes our expected utility of terminal wells, where the terminal wells is just the trading profit net of the cost of searching for predictors. You have noise traders and risk-neutral competitive dealers. So the timing is as follows. There are 3 periods, and the real novelty of the period of the model comes from the first period, the data mining stage, where speculators are searching for predictors in order to go to the market and trade on it. The trading period, the trading stage, the second period, is very standard. It's a rational expectation equilibrium model where speculators observe a signal, their predictor, and choose their strategy based on it and on the price. And then everyone trades, market clear, the asset price is realized, and last period is just the payoff of the asset that is realized. So what are these predictors that these speculators are looking for, are searching for? So first, there is a continuum of these predictors for the asset payoff, which are what they are signals, informative signals. So each predictor, each signal is characterized, indexed and characterized by its type theta, such that basically the signal is loading on the asset payoff omega with a weight equal to cosinus theta. And it's also loading on a noisy component, an epsilon, with a weight sinus theta. So basically, it's an imperfectly informative signal, and the theta is giving the informativeness of the signal. So if theta equals 0, basically this signal is perfectly informative, while if theta is equal to pi over 2, it's orthogonal. The signal is orthogonal to the asset payoff. It's completely uninformative. So the quality of this signal can also be measured by the signal to noise ratio of this predictor that we denote tau of theta, which is decreasing with this theta. So when it's infinite when theta equals 0, and it's equal to 0 when theta equals pi over 2. So these predictors, they are distributed according to some distribution phi. So now on this segment. So now the speculators are going to search for this predictor, and are going to search within a search space. So the search space is a little bit different from this initial distribution. So first, we assume that speculators are searching within data sets, and some data sets are not informative. There is a proportion 1 minus alpha that is non-informative. So there is a fraction alpha that of this data set that can be useful, that can be used to find informative predictors. And within these data sets, it's not really possible to find the very, very best predictors, especially the predictor that would give a signal perfectly informative are not reachable. There is an upper bound, which is given by this type theta lower bar, to the quality of the signal that you can get. So overall, the probability of finding a signal that is informative with some informativity, with some quality, is given by this thing here, alpha times the probability of theta being in the segment theta lower bar pi over. So the search here in our model is not a one shot. Actually, it's something that is sequential, and speculators can go for as many rounds of search as they want. So how does it work? A round of search goes this way. So a speculator, before searching, has to pay an exploration cost C. And when he pays this exploration cost, finds a predictor with the probability we just mentioned before, alpha times the probability that theta is in the segment theta lower bar pi over 2. And once speculator has found the predictor, she can decide to keep searching, so that is to look for another one, or to stop searching and wait for the market to open. So if she keeps searching, she has to go back and start another round of trading, that is, start the whole sequence. Of course, with the probability 1 minus this thing, 1 minus lambda, she finds no predictor, and she has to move to next round of search in order to find a predictor. So there are several parameters here. How do we interpret them in order to speak about progress in in information technologies? So greater computing power enables speculators to process data at a lower cost. So in our model, it corresponds to a decrease in the exploration costs. Data abundance, in contrast, can have different effects. So first, it pushes back the data frontier. That means the quality of the best predictor that is reachable increases. That corresponds to a decrease in this typical lower bar. But it can have an adverse effect, which is to reduce the fraction of informative data sets, which is measured here by a decrease in the parameter alpha. So altogether, we have 3 parameters to capture the effects of progress in information technology in our model. So to solve for the model, we are going to look at equilibrium in which speculators use a stopping rule strategy. It's very intuitive. When does a speculator decide to stop searching or to keep on searching? It depends on whether the predictor that has been found is of sufficiently high quality or not. So basically, there is a threshold. If the quality of the predictor that has been found is lower than this threshold, a theta larger than some theta hat, then the speculator rejects it and keep on searching. If it's sufficiently high, a theta lower than theta hat, then that's when the speculator stops search and decide to wait for the market to open. So after the data mining is over, after all speculators have found predictors, then trading starts. And trading is it's a very standard rational expectation equilibrium model. It's based on Vives 95. So I will just detail what we need from this trading period in the equilibrium determination description. So the equilibrium. So we focus on symmetric equilibria, that is, in which speculators all use the same stopping rule. So we are looking for a situation where the minimum quality of predictor that speculators are willing to accept is the same for all. So they all have the same stopping rule ex ante, but ex post, the predictors of different quality arise because the outcome of the search for predictors is random. So the ex post distribution of predictors quality across speculators is endogenous, and it depends in particular on the equilibrium threshold. So we will denote the average quality of predictors, which is an equilibrium outcome, used in the economy by tau bar of theta star. So to solve the equilibrium, of course, we do it backward. First, we solve for the trading stage and then for the data mining stage. So the trading stage, again, since it's a standard model, the solving is very standard. So it's in equilibrium, speculators who have very qualitative predictors, very precise signal, they trade more aggressively on their information. So the equilibrium price reflects the information about the asset payoff that is contained in the investor aggregate demand. So we can define the informativeness of the equilibrium price, and very naturally, it's something that is increasing with the average quality of the predictors in the economy. And then we can compute the expected utility from trading for a given speculator who obtained in the search a predictor with type theta. So it's this G of theta star. So this G is increasing, this gain is increasing with the quality of the predictor of this particular speculator, and it's decreasing through the informativeness with the average quality of predictors. Of course, it's a competition effect. The fact that other investors are informed reduces the gain of a particular speculator. So now, how do we solve for the optimal data mining? So to do that, we have to compute the continuation value of searching of a given investor. What is this? What is this continuation value? Is just the expected utility at the beginning of a round. So this is what you get before paying the exploration cost C, but this is also what you obtain when you decide to move to the next round. So it's something that is defined recursively. So once you have this continuation value, how do you determine the optimal threshold? So this theta bar, this theta hat at which you decide to stop searching? Well, it's with an indifference condition. So basically, when you draw a predictor with this particular quality theta hat, a speculator is indifferent between keep on searching or stopping searching. So there is the equality between the expected gain from trade and the continuation value. And finally, how do you determine the equilibrium data mining? So you are in equilibrium where the symmetric equilibrium where your response, your best response, the theta hat, is also the theta star that all other speculators are using. And what we show is that so this theta star is going to solve for this particular equation. And the first important result of the paper is to show that there is there exists an equilibrium that is unique. Okay, and so in equilibrium, the quality of the speculators predictors is distributed over this particular segment. So now what we want to do is to exploit our model to understand the effect of the progress in technologies, data abundance, and computing power using the parameters we have in hand. So the important result we obtain is that their effects are not the same. And what we show is that if you consider what happened when computing power increased, that is when you lower C, sorry. So it always induces speculators to be more demanding for the quality of their predictor. That is to have a lower theta star. In contrast, if you look at what happened when you push back the data frontier, when theta lower bar gets lower, it can induce speculators to be less demanding for the quality of their predictor. So to go in the other direction. So the problem of the needle in the haystack problem, which comes from a lower alpha, always induces speculators to be less demanding. It's just that you reduce the fraction of informative data sets, and it's quite obvious. So an illustration here, the up panel plots the theta star as a function of the search cost. So when the search cost, the exploration cost decreases, it decreases as well. While as a function of the data frontier, it first decreases, but then at some point it increases again. So there is less people are less less demanding in terms of quality of their the minimal quality they require to go on the market. So the economic mechanism is going this way. So when the cost of exploration decreases, the continuation value of searching increases, everything else equals. So speculators are more demanding, everything else equals, and they still are more demanding in equilibrium. So the needle in the haystack problem is basically similar to an increase in C, so that's why you go in the other direction. What is very interesting is to consider what happens when the quality of the most informative predictor increases, so that when you push back the data frontier. So on the one hand, the expected utility of trading of the speculators who find the best predictor, it increases. But the expected utility of trading for all other speculators decreases because of the competition effect, the fact that the average quality of predictor is going to increase following this pushback of the data frontier. So the net effect on the continuation value of searching is ambiguous, and the equilibrium effect remains ambiguous. So now the question is, how empirically can you observe this differential effect of these two dimensions of the progress in technologies? So we provide a few metrics here. So we show that if you look at stock picking skills, you can observe this differential effect. So what is the stock picking skill here? It's a way to measure the quality of the predictor used by a speculator, and you can obtain it by running the regression of the position of the speculator on the future asset return. And the beta of this regression is directly linked to the quality of the asset measure predictor. So if you look at the wedge between the maximum wedge between these beta, the difference between the maximum beta and the lowest beta across funds, you can show that the greater computing power will reduce this wedge, while data abundance can increase it. So another way to look at these different effects of data abundance and computing power is to look at the dispersion of trading profit. So we show that the dispersion of trading profit is actually decreasing when the computing power decreases, while it is increasing when the data frontier is pushed back, when theta lower bar is decreasing. Okay, So our model can say other things on other outcomes of the financial market, in particular on price informativeness. So we show that it's possible for price informativeness to decline when data abundance, that data gets more abundant, but only through alpha, through the fact that the needle in the haystack problem can become more severe. But in a way, since data abundance can both come with a pushback of the data frontier and an increase in the needle in the haystack problem, it could be potentially an explanation for why the effect of data abundance on asset price informativeness is ambiguous. And indeed, in our model, you can parameterize the data abundance, if you want a parallel decrease in alpha and theta lower bar to obtain at some point a decline in asset price information. All right, so to conclude, our model provides a micro foundation of information acquisition cost for investors. It's based on a search model, so it's potentially extensible in many ways. And what we show is that data abundance and greater computing power are two distinct dimensions of progress in information technologies, and they do not affect equilibrium outcomes in financial markets in the same way. Thank you.
All right, thank you very much, Jérôme. So discussing this paper is Dion Bongaerts from Erasmus University, Rotterdam. Please, Dion, you have 15 minutes.
Yeah, now it's on. Okay, thanks for giving me the opportunity to discuss this paper. I always very much enjoy reading the papers written by Jérôme and Thierry, and this one is no exception. So let me give you a quick overview of the background against which this paper is written. Over the past few years, we saw an enormous increase in new data available, not only in finance, but in pretty much every field. Not completely exogenous to that, we also saw an enormous increase in processing capacity of data and in newly developed algorithms or old algorithms that at the time were not feasible and are now being rediscovered. And this change is driven by data initiatives, in particular of the big techs, by an increased popularity of coding, infused by open source coding software, as well as a commoditization of supercomputer facilities such as Amazon Cloud. Now, the implications of all this is that data and prediction algorithms are used increasingly in corporate settings. Think about supply chain optimization, inventory management, scheduling optimization, marketing. For example, the websites that you visit are optimized towards your search behavior, and investments. And that is what this paper is about. So what the paper does is it analyzes the effect of data availability and data processing cost on financial market outcomes in a model where investors need to search for predictors. The space of predictors available is constrained by the data that's available, and search is costly. And once investors have obtained predictors, they can move to the next stage and trade on that information. Now, this model yields several findings, and some of them I find a bit more straightforward, and some of them I find really intriguing. And I used color codes to kind of give my assessment of that. So the first finding is that lower data processing costs increase predictor quality and price informativeness. That to me was not a surprise. Neither was that more data availability improves average predictor quality. What was not straightforward to me was that more data availability may reduce the worst predictor quality. I think that's a really neat result, especially if it also holds in realistic settings. And then in particular in the empirical implications part of the paper, I think there's really nice results on how improved average predictor quality can but need not reduce aggregate trading profitability of speculators, and also how data abundance can lower speculator welfare. That one I found it's some kind of problem of the commons result, which I really liked. Also the analysis on portfolio overlap of speculators I found really intriguing, and this is also relevant for market stability. If market participants have positions that don't overlap much, in case of a pandemic that forces liquidations, a situation that we saw in yesterday's keynote, then the run to the exit is less severe than when there is a lot of overlap. So I think this is really a very interesting and neat result. That having said, I'm a designated critic, so I also looked for some parts where improvements, in my view, was possible. And the first thing that I came across was this needle in the haystack effect. To me, it was a bit surprising that it was present, because it looked to me that it's inversely proportional to the processing cost, to the data processing cost. And I was even wondering whether a setting without alpha is isomorphic to a setting with a higher C. I love to hear from Jérôme whether my intuition is correct or not. And I had the feeling that alpha was only included for one particular empirical implication. I think if that is true, this can just go to a footnote and the additional complexity can be removed, or the additional complexity can be introduced to model something else that is potentially more relevant. A potential candidate for modeling something else that I think might be more relevant is the issue of overfitting. I didn't see anything in the paper on this topic, but when you employ machine learning algorithms, overfitting is a big issue. Overfitting is basically finding a predictor in sample that's not there out of sample, simply because you're considering too many variables. And when you use big data and all kind of complicated machine learning algorithms, this is a severe risk. There's some degree to which you can mitigate that, for example, by using cross-validation, but it comes at the expense of the power of your algorithm. Now, I was wondering, would this matter in the context of this model? And I think it does, because if you get overfitting, you basically end up with a predictor that you think is useful, but it's actually not. And investors have Kara utility, so they experience a welfare loss because of that, because they're taking a non-diversified position that's not gaining them anything and gives them additional risk. So maybe it's more interesting to model overfitting than just the needle in the haystack problem. Then another issue that I ran into is that I would like models to be as clean as possible in terms of the results they deliver on comparative statics. I had the feeling that also here there was a potential improvement that could be made. And the reason is the following. The parameter theta bar relates to the data frontier. Like the best predictor you could get. And I would like for that to really measure that. But in the model, it also affects the probability that you find a predictor to begin with. And I would like to have these two separated. It's easy to do that by simply dividing by simply normalizing your distribution. Same as you do with a truncated distribution to make up that to make sure that the CDF adds up to 1. Then I was thinking the way in which this model is set up is extremely elegant. It also allows for the signal to noise ratio to diverge to infinity as theta lower bar goes to 0. In the paper, there's not really anything said about how far theta lower bar can deteriorate. But my gut feeling is that in practice, there's a limit to that. That signal to noise ratio won't diverge completely to infinity, that there's a finite bound on it. Now the question is, where is that finite bound? And is that finite bound so constraining that you would maybe preclude some of the effects that the model can generate for realistic values of that bound? Because the high price impact you really get because the signal to noise ratio for the best predictors becomes very, 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 very large. That was just something I was wondering. Do we get these very interesting effects also in realistic regions? And then the last comment I had relates to a dimension that was not addressed in the paper. I understand that perfectly for tractability reasons. But it left me a bit puzzled and wondering whether something important was missed in that model. And that has to do with algorithm complexity. So the model views information technology as uniform in terms of complexity and costs. Whereas in reality, this is not the case. If you compare an OLS regression against running of a recursive neural network, you would see that there's a substantial difference in cost of both setting it up, running time, data requirements, and the like. You have a difference in automatic endogenous feature selection, which your neural network does, and your OLS you need to do much more yourself. You have a difference in the range of possible generated predictors that in a neural network can take all kind of forms, and for OLS are much more constrained. And even if you were to compare two types of neural networks for different hyperparameters, you would get massively different results on these dimensions. So I was wondering, should we rather model everything per unit of complexity? You may be able to still use the same model, but just with a different interpretation of what running a search is. Maybe 10 or 100 OLSs are equivalent to one neural network run with certain number of levels and other hyperparameters. It was just something I was wondering about. That having said, I really enjoyed the paper. I think it's very interesting and thought-provoking. I will definitely recommend it to my group of colleagues that is interested in fintech, and also 2 of my new PhD students that will start to work on the topic. And I've provided some suggestions that that can possibly help to align better with issues in modern prediction algorithms. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Dion. A very on-time discussion. So, Jérôme, would you like to respond briefly before we move to questions from the audience?
Yeah. So first, I'd like to thank Dion. It's a very good discussion. So in particular, the point you made on overfitting is, I think it's very right. Actually, it would be probably very nice to include it. It would not be that difficult. So thank you for the idea. For this effect, the second effect of the data frontier in terms of the probability of, that it determines also the probability of success. I agree. It's something we've thought a lot about, but there's no perfect way. It's a bit of a part of the model is that you could do like take the conditional the conditional distribution as you propose, but there's always, when you move this frontier, there's always something else going on, like the shape of the distribution that is moving in somewhere. So you cannot perfectly get like control for everything else, but the quality of the best predictor. It's not something I managed to design so far, but I agree it's something we're still thinking about. So probably there are ways to propose alternatives. So yeah, and yeah, your last point on the different type of algorithm, the different techniques, and try to introduce them in the model, maybe discursively at least in the paper, but indeed we have to think about it. So thanks.